Hey there, guys. Another episode of Burning Platform. Brian Sommer and Vinnie Mirchandani. Brian has hey boy, he's got a tie and he's got a halo around him. So I better be on my best game here today. Today, today is part three of a trilogy. We've done the CFO and the CHRO in the last couple of episodes. Today we're going to talk about the pandemic's effect on the CIO. What happened in the short term? What did they do next? Brian, why don't you kick it off? What did we see in the last 6 months?
Saw a number of things in no particular order. We saw a prioritization around some quick, fast, little short apps that had to either be developed or acquired, whatever, from some of the more nimble software companies to allow partial reopenings and those kind of things. We saw some companies spend money where they really needed to, like for a restaurant, sit-down restaurant needed to have something to handle takeout orders, or brick and mortar stores needing an omni-channel retail kind of capability. So we've seen a lot of those kind of stopgap deals. Obviously, we've seen a lot of people spend money on planning and budgeting tools and other things where they realized they had some real holes, and even some spending on for companies to acquire to acquire cloud-based versions of maybe some old on-premise products. Vinny.
Brian, I've been interviewing a bunch of C-level executives in what I call the acrobatics during the crisis series, and many of them have been CIOs. So clearly the biggest single thing I've heard from CIOs is massive amount of work from home within days, right? Tens of thousands of employees moving to work from home. I've heard from a number of them that on-premise software was a pain with a whole bunch of VPN provisioning, not being able to scale up or down easily. I've seen a lot of application holds as companies move their business plans, especially in the revenue generating areas. It could be telemedicine in healthcare. It could be, like you say, e-commerce as companies move to B2C, PPP loans in banking as they'll did a bunch of small business loans, emergency loans. So, and they had to plug those holes with a bunch of specialists, brand new players that you and I probably hadn't heard about 6 months ago. So those are some of the highlights that I've heard. I mean, there's a lot more we can unpack as we go through this. But let's rather than just focusing on what happened in the past, what would you say are the top 3 or 4 things they need to focus on?
Well, I think supply chain became a big issue for a lot of companies. I think, obviously, let's call it the return to office or return to plant kind of stuff is still going through a bunch of tuning and tweaking. The regulations and the rules keep changing daily, and I don't think everything's going to be quite solidified. Even some of the science around is like a forehead thermometer testing tool. Is that really the right product to use? So it's all over the map right now. Let's see. I'm trying to think what else is going to be out there. I do think some movement away from data center based things may be afoot. And you got to have a couple of Vinny. What do you see?
Brian, I think the last one you mentioned clearly is a hot topic. It's on-premise. It's a question of should you stay in your own data center? I mean, clearly the pandemic showed they couldn't scale that easily. So moving to a hyperscaler like a Google or an Amazon or a Microsoft is something a number of companies are looking at. And along with that, they're saying, if you do that, why don't we look at application management, cheaper application management, maybe third-party maintenance of applications. So on-premise moves clearly are on the agenda. I think reviewing the whole outsourcing framework. I mean, they've done a lot of outsourcing, with the big US firms or European firms, but also with the big offshore firms. And now that many of them have moved to work from home, people are looking at what risks do we have because employees are working from home, privacy, security issues, the whole issue of travel restrictions on outsources. That's become a big issue for CIOs. I think just an overall review of the whole application portfolio especially the revenue-facing side, where companies have seen a lot of holes during the last few months. I would say,
So,
go ahead.
yeah, so let's build on your point there. I think there's a business case to be made for rebuilding or rethinking your IT strategic plan now. The rate with which a lot of companies have decided to accelerate a number of digital transformation initiatives has been amazing. I just saw an IBM study this morning that they've seen a 58%, that's 58% increase in digital transformation kind of initiatives getting kicked off the board. Well, before you run out and just start doing a bunch of projects willy-nilly or whatever, I do think you need to have a game plan. And I think it's time to really look at one and revisit a bunch of old assumptions. The data center question is clearly one of them. The outsourcing one's another. Even right now, you got to ask, what kind of project mix do I want to have? You probably want to have smaller projects that can be more discreetly implemented very quickly by a remote work team, as opposed to some giant intergalactic, huge suite kind of project. Those probably aren't going to be on the table. From that, you could also draw some other conclusions about when and where and how you might engage with third parties, whether that's the maintenance firms you mentioned or the integrators, implementers. All those things I think are up in the air right now. A good CIO is taking this time to get a better plan.
Brian, you and I have both written books on digital transformation. I think the last 6 months, what I've seen is the digital transformation has become very, very verticalized, because the revenue opportunities and the applications that it takes to meet those are very, very industry specific. So that's been one big change. The other thing I'm a little worried about is people are rushing out and doing digital transformations. The ideal one is one where you get digital twins, parity between digital and your analog and physical structures. The companies that did well in the last few months, at Chick-fil-A, for example, they already had invested in 2-lane drive-throughs. The companies, the grocery chains that had relationships with Instacarts for last mile delivery. So you can't forget the physical side, the analog side of the business. I mean, Amazon clearly would not have been able to do it without all the investments they've made in their robotic warehouses and so on. So I'm a little worried that people are just focusing on the digital side of IT. It's got to be mirrored with the physical side also. But yeah, digital transformation clearly is hot.
So it's hot, but I also think I'm going to have a slightly different variation on your comment and say that a lot of people, I think, are confusing digital transformation with business transformation. And the two can be the same, and they can overlap in a lot of spots, like a Venn diagram. But a lot of the digital transformation stories I hear right now are people automating a previously manual function. And you may call that transformation, but frankly, if all you did was automate a manual process, to me, that's like putting a slap on a fresh coat of paint on an accent wall in your living room. You can stand back and go, oh, I love how that's transformed the room. It didn't transform anything. It was just a coat of paint. And a lot of these things, I think, are being digitally transformed, washed, if you will, and overhyped to death. So I would just caution the CIOs, don't fall for the hype, and certainly don't participate in it, because it'll come back to bite you in the end.
Yeah, so and to your point, I mean, a lot of people are looking at ERP Next Generation or CRM Next Generation. If it's just mostly better UX, a little bit of multi-tenancy, it's going to be a lot of expense for not much gain. That's not my idea of digital transformation.
I was going to say, on that exact point, I just wrote an 8-page rant on that issue, and I sent it to colleague John Reed over at Diginomica to kind of review it, because I do think there's a lot of people that are falling in and being seduced by the concept of replatforming ERP as if that's some magic button. It's hot, like you said, it's high cost, high risk to the business, and it brings an opportunity cost that you're not doing some other more strategic project while you're putting in all new plumbing to your ERP, package. which probably isn't going to result in radically new processes or anything else anyway. So, yeah, there's a lot of that going on. Shall we shift?
You sound like you're ready for an event. You're ready to get on a plane.
Yes.
Is that wishful thinking, or?
A very famous software CEO you and I both know well, he sent me an email yesterday, and it started off with, Brian, how long has it been since you've dusted off your suitcase? And he was wondering when I'm going to hit the road again. Yeah, I'm a little anxious for that. And I want to get back working with clients on the really big projects. I want to be able to steer, some of those hard-headed change management challenges that are on every project team. I want to look them square in the eye and figure out what are we going to have to do to get this thing through with those kind of roadblocks. How about you, Vinny? You itching to go?
Brian, I think it's time for us to go, but as in sign off on this episode. So why don't you get the last word in? What should CIOs be we've told them a lot. What should they prioritize?
I still think having a great plan is part and parcel of it, but they also need to build support within the organization, because I think some of the changes that are being proposed are so radical for a lot of people. They're going to catch a lot of folks flat-footed, and people are going to resist the change and are going to fight them on this, or they're going to try and make the new things work just like the old stuff did, and we're not going to see the change that you really want to achieve. You can't get it, package-ectomies aren't going to do it. Vinny.
On that point, I've asked a number of executives in the acrobatic series, how far will the bungee snap back? And, in previous shocks, I think people would say 80, 90%. This time, many of them have said 50%. They're hoping we don't go back to old bad practices or bad habits. We'll see. But, to your point, this is the time to push for some solid change.
Mm-hmm.
Well,
my old boss used to tell us all the time at Accenture, we have to have the courage to change in spite of our past success. And I would encourage your listeners to heed those same words. Anyway.
Well, thank you, Brian. So that's another episode in this trilogy. Look forward to seeing you in another episode of Burning Platform. Thanks, Brian.
Thank you, Vinny.